She couldn't scream anymore. 18 hours of labor had stripped her throat raw, stolen every last sound from her body, but she could still see. She saw her husband walk into the delivery room with another woman. She saw his mother slide a stack of papers into his hand and whisper, low but sharp, "Do it now while she's weak." She saw him step to her bedside, the smell of his expensive cologne turning her stomach, and lay the divorce documents on her still bloody stomach, right across the fresh line of stitches. "Sign it," he said. Her name was Amara Lowell, and at that moment she'd been a mother for exactly 6 minutes. "You got what you wanted," her husband Damian Cross added coldly. "A baby to trap me with. Now we're done." Her daughter was wailing in the nursery down the hall. Amara's body was still torn open, and security was already hovering near the door, waiting for the order to drag her out into a snowstorm because Damian's mother, Eleanor Cross, had decided that she didn't belong in this family. What none of them knew was that the mansion they were so desperate to protect, the empire they flaunted, the life they used as a weapon against her, had never truly been theirs. Amara's late father had left her an inheritance worth $1.3 billion, and what she would eventually uncover about the Cross family. It was deadly, not just to their money, but to their name, their power, their future. But before we go any further, if you believe no mother should be discarded at her most vulnerable, if you believe no woman should be treated like trash after giving life, hit subscribe in your heart for stories like this. And imagine leaving a comment right now telling us where you're watching from, because the way Amara made them pay will shake you to your core. Now let's go back to the beginning of her story. Either 10 years old. That was the age when Amara Lowell learned that the world does not pause for grief. The car crash took both her parents in one violent, shattering night. By morning, the world had already started moving on without them. No aunts or uncles came forward. No grandparents miraculously appeared. Family friends, who had once kissed her cheeks at dinner parties and called her princess, suddenly had urgent business trips, sick relatives, and full houses. Just a social worker with tired eyes and a clipboard stood in the doorway of what had been her home saying, "Sweetheart, you can take whatever fits in this small bag, okay? What do you choose when your entire life has to fit inside one backpack?" Amara chose her mother's silk scarf, the one that always smelled faintly of jasmine, and her father's old wristwatch, scratched on the edges, hands frozen at the exact time of the accident. Everything else, her books, her drawings, the stuffed elephant she'd slept with since she was 3, stayed behind in a house that would soon belong to strangers. Foster homes bled into one another after that. Some were cold, some were outright cruel. Most were simply indifferent. She learned quickly how to survive in each one. Keep your voice soft. Eat fast, or the food disappears. Never be the last to shower. Never show how much you miss what you lost. The other kids smelled her pain like sharks smell blood. They called her charity case. Leftover. The girl nobody wanted. One boy, older and mean in a way that came from his own scars, used to whisper, "If your parents really loved you, they wouldn't have died on you." That was the worst part, because on the darkest nights, some small, damaged part of her believed him. But in those same years, Amara discovered something no amount of money could buy. She discovered she could survive. She learned that tears changed nothing, that complaining made her a target, that the only person she could truly count on was the girl in the cracked bathroom mirror. Every night, lying on lumpy mattresses in rooms that smelled like bleach and stale air, she would pull her mother's scarf from under her pillow, feel the weight of her father's watch in her palm, and whisper the same promise. "I'll make it. I'll be okay. I'll be more than this." By 28, she had kept that promise in ways no one from those homes would ever see. She didn't have a mansion. She didn't have a luxury car or designer bags. What she had was something that felt more solid than all of that. Purpose. 3 days a week, after her receptionist job at a small clinic, she volunteered at St. Gabriel's Hospital. She read to children whose parents never visited. She sat with old men whose families lived too far away to come. She brought warm socks, cheap but new, to patients who arrived with nothing but thin gowns and fear. On Saturdays, she tutored kids from the roughest neighborhoods in the city, the ones with eyes too old for their faces, who flinched if you raised your voice, kids who reminded her of herself. Her apartment was tiny, One bedroom, one window that rattled when it was windy, a kitchenette barely big enough to turn around in. But it was spotless. Her thrift store dishes lined up perfectly. Her one good dress ironed every Sunday night. Meals portioned and labeled in neatly stacked containers because you learned to stretch everything when you'd grown up with scarcity. She never asked for help. Was that pride? Maybe. Or maybe it was just the reflex of someone who had been pitied her entire childhood. When people look at you like you're fragile, like you're a project, like your existence is some kind of charity, you learn to stand on your own 2 feet, even when they're bone-tired. Then came March 12th, the day everything shifted. St. Gabriel's lobby doors slid shut behind her, sealing in the antiseptic smell and soft beeping of monitors. Outside, the evening was cold, the sky iron gray. Amara pulled her coat tighter and started down the steps, head bent against the wind. The scream of tires cut through the street noise a second before the crash. Metal on metal, a sickening crunch, the hollow, stunned silence afterward. A black SUV had clipped a delivery truck at the intersection and spun hard into a light pole. People froze on the sidewalk, fingers already reaching for their phones. A few raised them, not to call for help, but to film. No one moved. Amara didn't think. She ran. The SUV's front end was crumpled, steam hissing from the radiator. The driver was slumped over the wheel, airbag deployed, blood sliding slowly from a cut on his forehead. The door was jammed. It took her 3 tries to wrench it open, her hands shaking but stubborn, the way they had been every time she'd been shoved and refused to fall. "Sir, can you hear me?" Her voice was calm even though her heart was pounding. "Don't move your neck. Just stay still." Basic first aid training from the hospital clicked into place. She pressed her mother's scarf. She still wore it, always against the wound on his head. Checked his pupils. Watched his chest rise and fall. "Someone call 911, she shouted at the frozen crowd. Only then did people jerk into action, phones sliding from filming apps to emergency numbers. The man's eyes fluttered open. There was something in the way he focused on her that told her he wasn't just some random driver. It was the weight behind his gaze, the way his hand twitched as if he was used to giving instructions, not receiving help. "You're okay," she told him, ignoring the fact that he very much was not. "You're going to be okay. Just keep breathing. Stay with me." She stayed until the ambulance came, talking the whole time. About nothing, really. About the weather, about how annoying the hospital coffee was, about how he owed her a decent latte when he got out of this. Anything to keep his eyes from shutting. When the EMTs finally took over, she stepped back, letting the professionals swarm in. She did what needed to be done. That was enough. At least she thought it was. As she turned to slip away, a gloved hand caught her wrist. "Wait," the man rasped, voice hoarse but educated. "Your name?" "Amara," she said, startled. "Amara Lowell." He studied her face like he was memorizing every line. "I'm Damien Cross," he said. "Thank you." His name meant nothing to her. She didn't scroll business magazines. She didn't follow finance news. She didn't know that Cross sat atop skyscrapers all over the city, etched in silver. To her, he was just a human being, bleeding in the street. She went home, washed blood out of her mother's scarf, heated leftover soup, and fell asleep with her father's watch on the nightstand. That should have been the end of it. 3 days later, the hospital receptionist called her name as she was leaving after her volunteer shift. "Amara, someone dropped this off for you." It wasn't a bouquet. It was an invasion. 24 white roses, perfect, heavy with scent, wrapped in paper that screamed money in a way no price tag had to. Tucked into the flowers was a cream card with looping handwriting. "You saved my life. Let me thank you properly." "Dinner? DC." She almost threw the card away. The rich men did not invite women like her to dinner out of pure gratitude. Men with power rarely did anything without a return in mind, and she was not interested in being anyone's project, anyone's story of, "Look how good I am, I rescue the poor." She texted the number anyway. "You don't owe me anything." The answer came back within seconds. "I know. I still want to say thank you. Please." Maybe it was that word. Rich people rarely said please, at least not to people like her. Maybe it was the loneliness she learned to carry like a weight in her chest. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe some part of her just wanted to believe that there were men who could say thank you without strings attached. So she said yes, not to dinner, coffee, in a public place, with an easy escape route. Damien Cross was handsome in the polished, expensive way that looks almost unreal up close. Perfectly cut dark hair, razor-lined jaw, suit tailored so well it made the rest of the room look badly lit. The kind of watch on his wrist that said, "I've never checked a price tag in my life." But when he spoke, he didn't talk about his cars or his companies or his portfolio. He asked about her, why she volunteered, what it was like for kids in the foster system, what made her run toward a crash when everyone else froze. "I don't know," she answered honestly, fingers wrapped around her cheap coffee cup while he barely touched his artisanal espresso. "I just couldn't stand there and do nothing." "Most people do," he said quietly. "Stand there and do nothing, I mean." There was something in his eyes then, a tiredness, a vulnerability that didn't match the rest of his glossy exterior. "I've spent my whole life around people who calculate the cost of everything before they act. You didn't calculate. You just moved. That's rare." She shrugged, uncomfortable with his attention. "Or just stupid." He laughed, a real laugh, unpolished and surprised. "Brave," he corrected. There's a difference." Coffee turned into more coffee, then into dinner at a place far too nice for someone who couponed groceries. But he listened when she joked about it and chose the quiet corner table instead of the showy one by the window. Walks through the city followed. Long conversations where she confessed that sometimes she dreamed of going back to school, and he admitted that sometimes he fantasized about being a nobody for a week. No meetings, no board votes, no headlines. "Everyone wants something from me," he said one night, leaning on a railing overlooking the river, city lights reflected in the water. "Money, access, a favor owed. You're the first person in years who looked at me and just saw a man bleeding who needed help." She understood more than he knew. "Everyone pitied me growing up," she replied. "The poor orphan, the foster kid. I hated that. I didn't want anyone's pity. I just wanted to be treated like a normal person, not a walking tragedy." "I see you, Amara," he said, taking her hand. "Exactly as you are." 6 months later, he proposed. Not at the top of a tower or in front of cameras, on her sagging, second-hand couch, knees nearly touching the coffee table, holding a ring so bright it looked like it had its own power source. "My mother is going to hate this," he warned, trying to smile. "Then maybe we shouldn't." He tightened his grip on her fingers. "I don't care what's on her list. I care about you. Marry me. Not because I'm Damien Cross, not because I have money. Marry me because when I'm with you, I feel like the man I wished I'd been, not the one everyone expects. How do you say no to that?" She said yes. She said yes, even though some quiet part of her, the part that had survived so much, whispered caution. She said yes because she loved him, because she believed love could bridge the gaps between worlds, because she had survived worse than a disapproving mother-in-law. Right? The wedding was small by Cross standards. No televised ceremony, no celebrity guest list, just immediate family and a few friends. Eleanor Cross arrived in black, not navy, not charcoal, funeral black, in a church full of soft colors and tentative hope. She didn't smile during the ceremony, not once. She didn't clap when the officiant pronounced them husband and wife. At the reception, when Amara approached and tried to properly introduce herself as your daughter-in-law, Eleanor let her gaze travel slowly, ruthlessly, from the cheap lace of Amara's borrowed dress to the scuffed heels she tried to hide. "So," Eleanor murmured, lips curved in a smile with no warmth, "you're the girl my son rescued from poverty. How charitable of him." Damien stepped forward. "Mother, I'm simply stating facts," Eleanor said, eyes never leaving Amara's face. "No family, no pedigree, no education worth mentioning. You could have had anyone, Damien. Instead, you chose a charity project." The words slammed into old scars. Amara felt shame claw up her throat, hot and choking, but she'd spent a lifetime learning how to swallow it. "I may not have money, Mrs. Cross," she replied quietly, "but I love your son, and I always will." "Love," Eleanor repeated, like the word tasted strange. "How quaint. Let's see how long that lasts when you're living in my house, eating my food, breathing my air." She glided away on stilettos that probably cost more than everything Amara was wearing combined. Damien squeezed Amara's hand. She just needs time, he whispered. She'll come around. But deep inside, Amara knew better. She'd seen that look before. In foster parents who resented the check that came with her, in other kids' eyes when they decided she wasn't worth defending. Eleanor Cross didn't need time. She'd already rendered her verdict. The only question was whether Amara could survive it. The Cross estate wasn't a home. It was a museum of wealth, and she was the piece nobody had asked to display. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, reflecting back an image of a woman who didn't seem to belong. Crystal chandeliers that dripped light like frozen raindrops. 15 bedrooms, 10 bathrooms, a wine cellar that went down 2 floors. Walls covered with art whose price tags made her dizzy when she Googled the signatures in secret. Damien carried her over the threshold, laughing, talking about our life together. Eleanor was waiting in the foyer. "Welcome," she said sweetly, "to your new prison, dear. Do try not to break anything. Everything here is worth more than you." The first family dinner was a test Amara didn't know she was taking. She cooked. It was instinct. She'd grown up learning that the person who cooked was harder to hate. So she spent the whole afternoon in the gleaming kitchen, baffled by appliances that looked like spaceships, carefully following recipes on her phone. Roast chicken with garlic and herbs, mashed potatoes smooth as clouds, glazed carrots, homemade rolls, simple food, but made with care. She set the long dining table herself, refusing the staff's polite offers. When Eleanor took her first bite, she chewed slowly, delicately dabbed the corner of her mouth with a napkin, and placed her fork down with a click that echoed. "Damien," she said in a voice that carried to every corner of the massive room, "is your wife trying to poison us?" Heat crawled up Amara's neck. I, I'm sorry, I thought—" "You thought," Eleanor cut in, "that peasant food would be suitable for this family?" She pushed her plate away as if it smelled bad. "Mrs. Chan," she called lightly. The head chef appeared within seconds, as if summoned from thin air. "In future, please ensure that the kitchen remains off-limits to Mrs. Cross Jr. We do have standards to maintain." The staff's faces stayed carefully neutral, but their eyes flickered with something that looked like pity. Damien picked at his food, flushed, clearly uncomfortable. He said nothing. Later, when Amara locked herself in their bedroom and cried into the pillow to muffle the sound, she asked the question that would haunt the rest of their marriage. "Why didn't you say anything?" Damien sat on the edge of the bed, not quite meeting her gaze. "She's set in her ways. If I confront her, she'll just get worse. It's better to let her vent. Eventually she'll calm down." Better for who? She didn't ask out loud. She already knew the answer. The cruelty became routine. The way Amara walked. "Stop slouching. You look like staff." The way she dressed. "Is that truly the only dress you own?" The way she spoke. "We don't use contractions in this house, dear. This isn't a street corner." At charity galas, Eleanor would introduce her as the girl Damien pulled up from nothing, or his little good deed. When Amara tried to offer opinions about books she'd devoured from the public library, or about art she'd quietly studied online, Eleanor would cut in with a laugh. "How charming that you have thoughts. But do leave the real conversations to those of us who actually went to university." 3 months into the marriage, a thin blue line appeared on a drugstore test in the en-suite bathroom. Amara stared at it for a long time, hand pressed to her mouth. A baby. Joy flooded through her like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. Maybe this would change things. Maybe a grandchild would soften Eleanor's stone heart. Maybe this child would be undeniable proof that she belonged. Damien cried when she told him. "We're going to be parents," he whispered, forehead pressed to hers. "Everything's going to be different now," they told Eleanor at breakfast. She set her coffee cup down with surgical precision. "Well," she said blandly, "even a broken clock is right twice a day. Let's hope your body knows what it's doing." The words were bullets Amara wasn't ready for. "What's that supposed to mean?" she asked. "Simply that breeding and raising children requires a certain constitution," Eleanor replied. "Let's not count our heirs before they hatch, shall we?" 8 weeks later, Amara was lying on a hospital bed, listening to a doctor say, "I'm so sorry." There's no heartbeat. The world went gray. Her first baby, gone. Her first hope, gone. When they came back to the mansion, Eleanor was waiting in the sitting room. "I heard," she said. "Such a shame, though perhaps for the best. Clearly, your body isn't equipped for this." "How can you say that?" Amara whispered. "How can you be so cruel?" "I'm not cruel, dear. I'm realistic. You come from weak stock. Your body is simply confirming what I already knew." Damien finally snapped. "Mother, that's enough." "Is it?" Eleanor asked, unbothered. "Your wife has one job in this family, to produce an heir. She's failed. What exactly is she good for?" Damien opened his mouth, closed it, had no answer. That night, staring at the ceiling while grief hollowed her out from the inside, Amara made a decision. She would try again, not because she wanted Eleanor's approval, but because she needed to prove, to herself as much as anyone, that she wasn't broken. The second pregnancy ended sooner. The third ended later. Each loss carved another line into her soul. Each time Eleanor sharpened her words, calling her barren, defective, a tragic waste of the cross name. Can you imagine? Can you imagine losing 3 babies and being mocked for it by the woman who should have been your family? By the time her body surprised her with a fourth pregnancy, nearly a year later, Amara had stopped hoping out loud. She told no one, wore looser clothes, avoided dinners, counted days in a small, secret notebook. But this baby was different, stronger, kicks like little drums against her ribs, heartbeats steady and defiant at every appointment. As her daughter grew, something else grew with her. Not hope, not exactly, something harder, sharper. Amara began to notice things she had trained herself to ignore. Whispered phone calls behind closed doors, binders left out on Eleanor's desk marked with charity logos, and oddly structured consulting fees. Men in suits who came and went at strange hours, never looking anyone in the eye. She started writing details down. Dates, names, amounts she glimpsed, account numbers half memorized. Not revenge, not yet, just survival instincts tightening. When you've been counted out your whole life, you learn to pay attention when powerful people assume you're too stupid or too broken to understand what you're seeing. By 9 months, she had two things: a baby who refused to give up, and a simmering awareness that the Cross Empire was not nearly as clean as its polished marble. The worst winter storm in 20 years hit the city on the day her water broke. Snow slammed against the windows at 3 in the morning. Wind howled like a living thing. Amara gripped the bed frame as a contraction tore through her and gasped, "Damien, it's time." His face went white. Okay, we've got this." They barreled through snow-choked streets, the driver cursing under his breath as tires struggled for traction. Amara focused on breathing, on counting, on not surrendering to the animal panic that wanted to take over. The pain was indescribable, white-hot, all-consuming, like her body was splitting in two. But beneath it, there was a strange, fierce joy. Every contraction meant progress. Every wave of agony meant her daughter was closer. If she could survive this, she thought, she could survive anything. Labor lasted 18 hours. Nurses adjusted monitors. Doctors murmured about complications and fatigue. Damien held her hand at first, eyes wide, muttering encouragements. At hour 6, his phone buzzed. "I need to make a couple of calls," he said softly. "About the firm. I'll be right outside." He was gone an hour. When he came back, he smelled like cologne he hadn't been wearing earlier. She was too exhausted to question it. At 9:42 p.m., after one last burning push, a cry split the air. Her daughter arrived furious at the world, tiny, purple-faced and screaming. The doctor laid her on Amara's chest, and time folded in on itself. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a full head of dark hair, and a voice that could wake the dead. "Hi," Amara whispered, tears finally spilling. "Hi, Mela. You're here. You're real. You're mine." They took the baby away for Tess, promised to bring her back quickly. For a few precious minutes, Amara lay in the wreckage of her own body, stitches fresh, muscles trembling, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Pride. She had done it. She was not broken. She was a mother. Then the door opened. Damien walked in. He wasn't alone. Eleanor swept in behind him in a fitted black dress like she was attending a funeral, not welcoming a new life. And trailing them, wrapped in a cream-colored coat in arrogance, was a young woman Amara had never seen before. 23, maybe, with salon hair, diamond earrings, and the bored expression of someone who has never once wondered where her next meal is coming from. Damien, Amara's voice cracked. What's going on? He wouldn't meet her eyes. Eleanor stepped forward, a manila envelope in her hand. Amara, dear, she said, voice honeyed with poison. We need to discuss your future, or rather, your lack of one in this family. The room tilted. I don't understand, Amara whispered. Amara, Eleanor's smile turned into that razor-thin line Amara knew too well. It's quite simple. My son is divorcing you. Today. Right now. These, she dropped the envelope onto Amara's bloodstained gown, are the papers. All you need to do is sign. For a heartbeat, Amara waited for the punchline, waited for Damien to say, Mother, enough. This isn't funny. Waited for him to become the man who had once told her he saw her. Damien, she rasped, throat raw. Tell her this is insane. I'm sorry, Amara. His voice was flat, practiced. This marriage never worked. You don't fit this life. My mother was right. You tried. I'll give you that. But trying isn't enough. The young woman in cream slid her arm through his with casual ownership. Who is she? Amara demanded, though part of her already knew. This is Kendra Brennan, Eleanor said proudly. Old money, proper family. Everything we should have insisted on from the beginning. She will be Damien's wife within the month. She'll give him the family you never could. Can you imagine? Can you imagine lying there, stitches fresh, body still bleeding from giving life, and being told you're being replaced? My daughter, Amara choked. She's 6 minutes old. That child, Eleanor cut in, is precisely the problem. Evidence that you trapped my son. Well, congratulations. You got your 9 months. But this family needs more than one sickly child from weak stock. Kendra is young, healthy, fertile. She'll give Damien multiple heirs. You, her gaze skimmed over Amara like she was dirt on the floor, have served your purpose. Sign the papers, Amara, Damien said. You'll get nothing. No alimony, no property. Those are the terms. Sign them and walk away quietly, or I'll make this a war you can't afford to fight. The words sliced deeper than the surgeon's scalpel had. Amara looked from his face to the envelope, to the woman wearing her husband's arm like jewelry. What about, her voice was barely air, what about my daughter? She stays with us, Eleanor snapped. She's a cross. She'll be raised properly, not by some foster home stray with no degree and no prospects. Every nerve in Amara's body screamed. Every instinct told her to fight, to claw, to bite, to tear this room apart with her bare hands if she had to. But she was one woman, gutted, weak, alone. They had money, lawyers, power, and cruelty that knew no limits. If she fought right now like this, she would lose. They would take Mila anyway. She had learned one thing better than any other. Sometimes to survive, you retreat. I want to see her first, Amara said finally, voice trembling but steady enough. I want to hold my daughter one more time before I sign anything. Eleanor checked her watch. 5 minutes, then we're done. A nurse, oblivious to the venom in the room, brought the baby back, swaddled, sleeping, impossibly tiny. Amara gathered Mila against her chest and memorized. The curve of her ear, the little furrow between her brows, the way her fingers curled into soft fists, like she was already ready to fight. I'm not giving up, she whispered into that downy hair. This isn't over. I will come back for you. I promise. Then, before her courage could shatter, she lifted the pen with shaking fingers and signed where they pointed. Her name scratched across the paper, the end of a marriage. They thought that signature was the end of her story. They had no idea it was the beginning. Because what Damien and Eleanor didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask, was very simple. Amara Lowell was not the charity case. She was the heir, and the fortune they had been living on, including the house they'd just thrown her out of, had never truly been theirs. It was hers. And one day, very soon, she would make them learn that the hard way. She couldn't scream anymore. 18 hours of labor had ripped the voice out of Aurora Miles' throat, but her eyes still worked. They saw everything. They saw the door to the delivery room open. They saw her husband, Damian Cole, step in with another woman on his arm. They saw his mother, Evelyn, glide in behind them, pearls perfectly in place, like this was a brunch, not a blood and sweat battlefield where Aurora had just given birth to their child. "Do it now while she's weak," Evelyn hissed, shoving a stack of papers into her son's hand. "Before she starts clinging again." Aurora lay there, body torn open, fresh stitches burning, IV drip still taped to her hand. Her newborn daughter had been in this world for 6 minutes. 6 minutes. Damien walked to the side of the bed without looking at Aurora's face, his expensive cologne mixed with the metallic scent of blood and antiseptic. He laid the papers on her still bloated, still bleeding stomach. "Sign," he said. Her brain struggled to process the word. "Damien, what?" "You got what you wanted," he replied, voice flat, rehearsed. "A baby to trap me with. Now you're done." Behind him, the young woman in the cream-colored designer coat shifted her weight, diamond earrings catching the fluorescent light. She was maybe 23, salon hair, spa skin, the kind of beauty money maintains. She looked at Aurora the way you look at something you're sure the cleaners should have removed already. "Who is she?" Aurora whispered. Damien didn't answer. Evelyn did. "This is Sloane Hart," she said smoothly. "From a proper family, proper breeding, proper everything. She'll give my son what you couldn't." Can you imagine hearing that while your body is literally still open from birth? Aurora tried to sit up. Pain shot through her abdomen so sharply she nearly blacked out. "I just had your child," she rasped. "Your daughter is down the hall." "That child," Evelyn cut in, "is the problem. Proof that you manipulated my son. Well, congratulations, dear. You got your 9 months. But this family needs more than one sickly child from weak stock. Sloane will give Damien multiple heirs. Healthy ones." Sloane smiled. Tiny. Apologetic. False. "I'm sorry you're going through all this," she said, gesturing vaguely at the monitors. The blood, the wreckage of Aurora's body. "But Damien and I—" "Shut up," Aurora croaked, and there was steel under the shredded voice that made even Sloane blanch. She turned to her husband, this man she'd held in the dark, whose nightmares she'd calmed, whose fears she'd carried. "Damien, look at me." Slowly he did. His eyes were tired, guilty, already somewhere else. "We're married," Aurora whispered. "I lost 3 babies trying to give you a family. You saw me bleed on your marble floors. You saw your mother call me barren to my face. And now, this? Here?" His jaw tightened. "It was never going to work," he said. "You're not suited for this life. You tried, I tried. But my mother was right. You don't belong." There it was. The sentence Evelyn had been carving into Aurora since day one. You don't belong. The divorce papers were simple, brutal. No alimony, no property, no support, a single page with tidy lines and pre-printed cruelty. "You're delirious," Evelyn said lightly. "You'll sign, or we'll make things unpleasant." Aurora's fingers curled in the bedsheet. "My daughter?" she whispered. "What about my daughter?" "She stays with us, obviously," Evelyn said, as if discussing who got the better car. "She's a Cole. She will be raised properly, not by some orphan who grew up on handouts and pity." Every nerve in Aurora's body screamed no. The instinct to fight was primal, wild, feral. She wanted to rip out IV lines, tear monitors from the wall, claw at faces, throw herself down the hallway and barricade herself in the nursery. But she was one woman, bleeding, sutured, barely conscious. They had lawyers, money, connections, judges who owed them favors. If she fought now like this, they'd crush her and still take Nia. So the girl who had survived 14 foster homes in 12 years did what survival had taught her. She retreated to fight another day. "I want to see her," Aurora said. Damien frowned. "What?" "Before I sign anything," she said, forcing each word out around the pain. "I want to hold my daughter one more time." Evelyn checked her diamond watch, annoyed. 5 minutes, she snapped. "Then we're finished." A nurse brought the baby in, swaddled in hospital blankets, hair dark and soft against her tiny skull. She had Damien's eyes, fierce, accusing, completely innocent. Aurora took her daughter and everything else fell away. The papers, the betrayal, the snowstorm gathering outside. "Hi, little warrior," she whispered, voice breaking. "Your name is Nia. It means purpose. You are mine." She memorized everything as fast as she could. The curl of the ear, the tiny dimple near the chin, the way Nia's fingers curled around her thumb with surprising strength. "I am not giving up," Aurora breathed into the baby's skin. "I will come back for you, I swear it. On my mother's scarf, on my father's watch, on every night I spent alone, promising I'd become more than what they said I was." She handed Nia back before she lost the courage. Then she picked up the pen. Her hand shook so hard her signature was almost a scratch, but she signed. Not because she accepted their terms, because she was buying time. "Good girl," Evelyn said, snatching the papers like a prize. "You have 1 hour to clear out of this hospital before security escorts you. It wouldn't do for guests to see you clinging in the hallways." Aurora swung her legs over the side of the bed. The room spun. Pain roared. Blood pulsed hot between her legs. She forced herself to stand. You know that moment in movies where the heroine collapses and everyone rushes in? That didn't happen. The only person who stepped forward was an older nurse with tired eyes and a heart that still worked. In the discharge hallway, she pressed a wad of cash, $200, into Aurora's trembling hand. "No woman should be thrown out after giving birth," the nurse said quietly. "Find somewhere safe. Survive. That's enough." Aurora wanted to refuse. Pride still twitched inside her like a dying animal. But pride didn't buy bus tickets. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll pay you back." The nurse squeezed her shoulder. "Just live," or she said. "That's payment enough." Outside, the blizzard had turned vicious. Snow claws scraped at Aurora's cheeks. Her thin hospital scrubs were soaked within seconds. Everything she owned fit into a cheap plastic bag. Again. Just like when the social worker had told 10-year-old Aurora Miles to pick one small backpack to represent an entire life. 10 years old, 30 years old, different storms, same feeling. The taxi driver glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Where to?" Aurora thought about the mansion where she'd be arrested for trespassing. Thought about foster homes that no longer existed. Thought about all the doors that had closed on her over the years. Then she gave him the address of the only place that might still take her. A women's shelter she used to volunteer at on her days off from St. Bridget's Hospital. The drive through the storm was a blur of pain and streetlights. Every bump tore through her torn muscles. Every red light gave her time to picture Nia alone, in a wing of polished white, surrounded by people who thought her mother was disposable. The shelter almost turned her away. "We're full," the intake worker said, not unkindly. "We don't have any more beds." "Error." Aurora opened her mouth to argue and instead collapsed, blood blooming through the thin fabric at her thighs. They found a cot. They found a thin blanket. They found a volunteer with shaking hands to check her stitches and whisper that things would be okay even if she did not believe it. Aurora lay there in the dark, surrounded by strangers' breaths and the hum of ancient radiators. Arms empty, body empty, heart shredded. Most stories end here. Most people break here. But Aurora had spent her whole life learning how to live without anyone catching her when she fell. That night, staring at water-stained ceiling tiles and tasting betrayal like metal on her tongue, she made a promise. "I will become someone they can't touch," she whispered. "Someone they can't throw away. And when I come back, I won't be asking for a place at their table." She had no idea that less than a week later, someone would walk into that shelter and tell her a truth that changed everything. The house they'd thrown her out of had never been theirs. It had always been hers. 3 days after giving birth, still bleeding, still waking up gasping from phantom contractions and the echo of Damien's voice saying, "Sign it." That's when the man in the expensive suit walked into the shelter. He looked wrong there, like a stock photo dropped into the wrong scene. Polished shoes on cracked linoleum. Wool coat too fine for the peeling paint. "Aurora Miles?" he asked, scanning the room of metal bunks and donated duffel bags. She was folding secondhand clothes at the foot of her cot, pretending she still had a life to organize. "Who's asking?" she replied, instinctively bracing for another blow. He handed her a card. "Daniel Mercer," the card read. Senior partner, Mercer and Holt, estate law. I've been trying to find you for 3 years, he said. Your father's estate has finally cleared probate. For a second, the words didn't land. Estate and father did not belong in the same sentence in Aurora's head. My father died when I was 10, she said slowly. There was no estate. There was a car crash. There was a social worker with a clipboard. There was foster care. Daniel opened his leather briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents the thickness of a novel. Your father was Lionel Miles, he said, founder of Miles Innovations, tech patents, real estate, international holdings. When he died, his business partner tried to claim everything. There were lawsuits, appeals. The courts froze all assets while they tried to untangle it. No one could access the funds to care for you. The system placed you in foster care. He slid a file toward her. The legal battle ended 6 months ago. The partner lost. Everything reverted to the rightful heir. Aurora stared at him. The rightful... What? You, Daniel said. You are Lionel Miles' only child. His entire estate is yours. How much? The question came out as a shaky exhale. Daniel met her eyes. Current valuations put it at around $1.3 billion, he said quietly, give or take market fluctuations. You know that feeling when the ground drops out from under you on a roller coaster? It felt like that, except there was no safety bar, and nobody had warned her the ride was about to start. I was sleeping on a cot, Aurora whispered, eating donated soup, while I was a billionaire. Daniel's expression was compassionate but matter-of-fact. Finding you was difficult. You changed homes repeatedly. Sometimes paperwork had your last name misspelled. Sometimes you were listed under your mother's maiden name. After you aged out, you took cash jobs, no credit cards, no fixed address. You were essentially invisible. How did you find me now? He tapped the corner of the file. Your marriage license, he said. To Damien Cole. The investigators tracked you to the Cole mansion. By the time I got there, you were already gone. The divorce wasn't yet on record. The shelter was the next logical search. She wanted to laugh, a wild, broken sound. Do they know? She asked. The Coles? Evelyn? Damien? No one but my firm knows the full extent, Daniel replied. Client confidentiality. Your information is yours to control. Aurora went very still. No one knows, she repeated, and then a thought cut through the fog like a blade. The house, she said. The mansion on Bellevue Hill. Who owns it? Daniel flipped through a different folder. Bellevue Hill, Lot 27. Purchased 22 years ago by Miles Holdings as an investment property. Long-term lease to the Cole family. That lease expired 8 months ago. Because we couldn't locate you to renew, they're currently squatting. Aurora started to laugh then. Not hysterically, not wildly. Slow, sharp laughter that tasted like satisfaction and blood. For 3 years, she said, Evelyn told me I was living on their charity, that I should be grateful for every bite, every square foot. She had me thrown into a snowstorm from a house my father bought. Daniel hesitated. There's more, he said. Of course there was. He opened a slim red file marked confidential. Your father kept meticulous records of his business dealings, he said, including transactions with Evelyn Cole. There are forged invoices, shell companies, diverted charity funds. He suspected she was embezzling from a foundation they co-managed. He was preparing to go to the authorities at the time of his accident. Aurora's fingers tightened on the chair. Are you saying... I'm saying there's clear evidence of financial crimes, Daniel cut in. Embezzlement, fraud, tax evasion. The statute of limitations has not run out. As for the crash, he flipped to a photocopy of an old police report. The investigating officer noted irregularities in the brake lines. The case was closed as accidental. The detective in charge, according to your father's handwritten note, is Evelyn's cousin. The room seemed to tilt, not with fresh grief. She'd already bled that dry years ago, but with something colder. Not just cruelty, not just snobbery, motive, means. Can we prove she killed them? Aurora asked. Her voice was surprisingly calm. Daniel shook his head slowly. Too much time has passed. Evidence degrades. Witnesses vanish. But we can absolutely prove the financial crimes. If you choose to, we can destroy her reputation and freedom in court. Aurora sat back, heart pounding. She thought of Evelyn calling her barren after each miscarriage. Evelyn laughing at her peasant food. Evelyn standing in that hospital room, in her funeral black dress, telling her she was weak stock. She thought of Nia down the hall in the nursery, gasping her first breaths while her mother was being erased. "What do I have to do to access my father's estate?" Aurora asked. "Sign here, here, and here," Daniel said, sliding new documents forward. "We'll need your ID, your birth certificate. The full transfer takes a few weeks, but I can release emergency funds today." "How much is emergency?" she asked. "A line of credit substantial enough to secure housing, medical care, legal counsel, security," he said. "7 figures." A week ago, $1,000 would have felt like a miracle. Now she had access to money that could buy the hospital that had discharged her like trash. "I need a place to live," she said slowly. "Medical care, clothes, and the best custody lawyer in the state." A ghost of a smile touched Daniel's mouth. "I anticipated that," he said. "I've already made contact with Helena Park. She hasn't lost a custody case in 15 years. She'll see you tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Aurora repeated. "You have 6 weeks," Daniel said, glancing at his notes. "Damien's public spectacle with his new fiancée is set for then, isn't it? The wedding?" Of course he knew. These people always knew. Aurora closed her eyes for a moment. 6 weeks. 6 weeks to heal. 6 weeks to transform. 6 weeks to turn from a discarded woman into a weapon. "I want to be ready before they realize what I am," she said. "Can you keep this quiet until I say otherwise?" "Attorney-client privilege," Daniel replied. "No one hears a word unless you authorize it." "But Aurora, what exactly are you planning?" She opened her eyes. They were different now. Clearer. Harder. "I'm going to take back my daughter," she said. "Then I'm going to take everything else." 6 weeks. It wouldn't be enough to become a different person, but it would be enough to become the most dangerous version of herself. 6 weeks later, the Cole estate looked like a fairy tale. White tents, crystal chandeliers, flowers imported from 3 continents, a string quartet playing for 500 guests who'd pretended not to gossip about how fast Damien Cole had replaced his wife. They didn't know that every camera in the room would be capturing something very different that day. Aurora's black sedan rolled up to the mansion's front steps, her mansion now, at exactly 2 o'clock. She stepped out in an ivory suit so sharply tailored it might as well have been armor. Her hair, once a curtain she hid behind, was now a sleek bob framing her face like a blade. In her arms, 6-week-old Nia slept against her chest, wrapped in soft cashmere. Her security team stepped out first. 3 quiet men in dark suits who looked like they'd been hired to protect heads of state. The valet moved toward her, already frowning. "Ma'am, this is a private event. The Cole wedding—" Aurora handed him the keys like she'd been doing it all her life. "Park the car," she said calmly, "and remember whose driveway you're standing on." She didn't wait for his answer. Inside, the main hall was a sea of silk, sequins, and whispered judgment. Conversations died as she entered. Heads turned. Somewhere, a champagne flute slipped from someone's hand and shattered on marble. Evelyn saw her first. If you've ever watched a predator realize the prey it thought was dead is now walking toward it, that was the expression. "What are you doing here?" Evelyn snapped, voice too sharp to hide. "Get out! Security!" She gestured wildly, but the venue's security froze. Aurora's own team had already taken up quiet positions at every door. More importantly, every guest had pulled out their phones. Little red record lights blinked like tiny eyes. "Hello, Evelyn," Aurora said. Her voice carried easily. It was the voice of a woman who'd rehearsed this moment in her bones. "Lovely party. Shame about the venue, though." "This is my son's home," Evelyn hissed. "You have no right—" Aurora slipped a folded document from her bag with one hand, shifting Nia higher on her hip. "This property," she said, "was purchased by Lionel Miles 22 years ago. The lease you enjoyed expired 8 months ago. The owner never renewed it because she was too busy being thrown out of a labor room." She let the deed unfold and handed it to the closest guest. "Pass it around," she said pleasantly. "Don't worry, it's public record. Daniel, make sure they see the owner of record line, would you?" Daniel, immaculate as always, had entered through a side door. He nodded, already moving. Whispers crackled through the room like static. "Own the house? Miles' estate? Squatting?" Damien pushed through the crowd, Sloane gripping his arm in a white lace gown that cost more than most people's houses. "Aurora," he said, face pale. "You can't just what?" she asked. "Show up to my own property? Bring our daughter to see the man who traded her for a new inheritance? Or tell 500 of your closest friends what you did in a hospital room?" Sloane's eyes widened at the word daughter. "You said she was unstable," Sloane hissed at him. "You said she'd lost her mind." Aurora smiled without warmth. "Did he not mention the timing?" she asked Sloane directly. "He served me divorce papers on my stomach while I was still bleeding from a C-section. His mother scheduled it between contractions." Gasps surged like a wave. Evelyn tried to cut back in, voice brittle. "She's lying. She's always been dramatic." "Funny," Aurora said, tilting her head, "because the hospital's security cameras disagree, and so do the nurses who watched you drag me out into a blizzard in a paper gown." She raised her voice slightly. "If anyone's curious," she called out, "Helena Park has filed the custody motion. The entire story is in the court record. It's public. Feel free to look it up when you get home." Helena, tall, composed, stepped forward, a thick folder in her hands. "Mr. Cole," she said, addressing Damien, "you've officially been served." She placed the papers in his shaking hands. "Motion to vacate the coerced divorce. Motion for emergency transfer of full legal and physical custody of minor child Nia Miles Cole to her mother. Motion for supervised visitation only. Pending investigation into your fitness as a parent." Damien's fingers clenched. "You can't take her," he said hoarsely. "She's my daughter." Aurora's eyes never left his. "You took her first," she said quietly, "from a woman who could barely stand." The room had gone utterly still. "Tell them, Damien," Aurora said, voice suddenly soft. "Tell them how long it took you to replace me. 6 weeks? Less? Tell them how you stood in a recovery room with blood still on the floor and dumped your wife like old stock while your fiancé waited in the hallway." Sloane slapped his arm away as if burned. "You said it was mutual," she whispered. "You said she left you." Aurora's gaze moved back to Evelyn. "But we aren't just here for domestic drama, are we?" she said. "We're here for charity." She nodded once. At that silent cue, a uniformed officer stepped into view alongside a stern-faced man from the district attorney's office. "Evelyn Cole," the DA announced, voice cutting through the murmur, "you are under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and tax evasion related to the Miles Cole Children's Foundation." The color drained from Evelyn's face. "You can't be serious," she sputtered. "This is absurd." "We have 15 years of bank records," the DA said calmly. "Transfers from the charity into accounts you control, fake invoices, shell corporations, offshore holdings. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it." Handcuffs glinted in the chandelier light. Evelyn took a step back like a caged animal. "Do you know who I am?" she shrieked. "Do you know what I can do to your career? Do you know what you did to sick children?" Aurora shot back. "Because that's whose money you stole." You could hear people exhale. You could feel something shift. The crowd actually recoiled from Evelyn, as if greed and cruelty were contagious. The officer snapped the cuffs around her wrists. The sound echoed like a punctuation mark. Click. Evelyn twisted toward Aurora, eyes wild. "You!" she spat. "You did this!" Aurora shifted Nia on her hip. The baby stirred, but didn't cry. "No," Aurora said. "You did this. I just turned on the lights." They led Evelyn out past 500 guests, past waiters frozen mid-tray, past the string quartet that had lost its place in the music. Every phone was up, every angle captured. This was going to live online forever. Aurora turned back to Damien. "I begged you to defend me," she said. "When your mother called me defective, when I lost our babies, when she humiliated me at your table, you stayed silent every time." He swallowed hard. "I was wrong," he said. "I know that now. You know it," Aurora cut in. "But that doesn't unsign the papers you dropped on my body. It doesn't unthrow me from my own house. It doesn't unerase the nights I lay awake in a shelter, fighting infection and nightmares, while you tried on tuxedos. Callista, perfect, trembling, mascara running, tried one last time. "You can't do this here," she cried. "This is our wedding." "Was," Aurora corrected. "Past tense." The moment the DA walked in, this stopped being a wedding and started being a crime scene. She let that land. Then she lifted her chin. "You have 30 days to move your things out of my property," she said. "After that, anything left becomes mine. Like everything else you were so sure I'd never touch." And with that, she turned. Her heels clicked across marble like a countdown ending. Her security team flowed around her. Guests parted like the sea. Nia yawned against her shoulder, completely unimpressed by the downfall of the Cole dynasty. At the door, Aurora paused and looked back one last time. Damien stood alone in the wreckage of his perfect day, fists still clenched around useless papers. Sloane sagged against a column. The quartet had stopped playing. "Here's what you should all remember," Aurora said, voice clear and steady. "You called me a charity case. You called me weak. You called me barren. But I wasn't the one living on money that wasn't mine. I wasn't the one stealing from children. I wasn't the one too cowardly to stand up to his mother." She smiled, small, lethal. "They didn't destroy me," she said. "They funded the woman who would destroy them." Then she stepped out into the sunlight with her daughter and did not look back. The wedding was over. The real story was just beginning. Revenge is satisfying, but it's not a life. Aurora understood that faster than most people might. In the weeks after the wedding, as headlines screamed about the Bellevue Hill massacre and Society Queen arrested at son's vows, she stayed quiet. No interviews, no tearful talk show confession, no influencer-style My Side of the Story videos. She stayed home with Nia. She met with lawyers. She watched the Cole empire collapse on paper. Helena updated her weekly. "Custody is secure," Helena said, sliding new documents across Aurora's kitchen island. The penthouse Daniel had secured overlooked the city, all glass and quiet power. The judge called the divorce unconscionable. "You have full legal and physical custody. Damien has supervised visitation only." "Sure not good," Aurora said softly, glancing toward the nursery where Naya napped under a mobile of stars. "What about them?" she asked. "Evelyn will do serious time," Helena replied. 18 years with no parole for at least 12. She pled out when she saw the jury. "And Damien?" Helena almost smiled. "He's broke," she said. "The firm lost almost all its clients. His accounts are frozen pending investigation into the commingling of embezzled funds. The Porsche, the Aspen Chalet, the yacht, gone." Aurora listened and felt surprisingly little. She had thought justice would taste like champagne. It didn't. It tasted like clean water after years of swallowing poison. Necessary, plain, life-giving. The first time Damien came to see Nia under court supervision, he looked like a ruin of the man she'd once loved. No tailored suit, no watch that could cover a year's rent. Just a wrinkled shirt, hollow eyes, and hands that shook when he reached for his daughter. "Hi, little one," he whispered, voice breaking. Nia sized him up for 2 seconds and then patted his cheek, unconcerned with his sins. Aurora watched from the observation room, arms folded. He glanced up at the glass, knowing she could see him. When the visit ended, Helena asked, "Do you want to restrict him further?" Aurora watched Damien pass Nia back to the supervisor, eyes wet and haunted. "No," she said eventually. "The court can monitor. If he shows up for her, that's his redemption. If he doesn't, that's his sentence." She turned away from the glass. "I'm done handing out punishments," she added. "Life's doing a good enough job." That could have been the end of the story. The girl who had nothing discovers she owns everything. The abusers fall. The heroine walks away with the baby on her hip and the world at her feet. But Aurora knew something most revenge stories forget. After you burn down the old world, you have to decide what to build in its place. She thought about all the women she'd met at the shelter. Women who had no hidden inheritance. No billionaire father, no brilliant lawyer showing up with a file full of miracles. Women who would never have a Bellevue Hill moment, but who might survive if they had just a little help at the right time. "What if the next girl doesn't get lucky?" she asked Daniel one afternoon, staring out over the city. "What if she has no Miles fortune? No Lionel? No Daniel Mercer?" "Then she needs someone else's safety net," Daniel said quietly. "Yours." The idea lodged in her like a seed. Within months, blueprints covered her dining table. The Bellevue Hill mansion, once a monument to her humiliation, was reduced to rubble by demolition crews. In its place, Aurora designed something her younger self would have killed for: the Lionel Miles Center, free childcare for single mothers, job training labs, legal aid offices, trauma-informed therapy rooms, a bright library full of books about women who refuse to stay small. The first time she stood across the street and watched the wrecking ball swing into the marble facade she'd once polished with tears in her eyes, she didn't feel triumphant. She felt free. This isn't about destroying them, she told Patricia, a documentarian friend of Daniel's who'd been filming the process. It's about refusing to live in their architecture. The center opened a year later under a gray sky that couldn't dampen the crowd's energy. Women lined up down the block, toddlers on hips, worn hope in their eyes. Aurora cut the ribbon with Nia holding her hand. "I won't tell you my whole story," she said into the microphone. "You've probably read the most dramatic parts online. Instead, I'll tell you this. I know what it's like to have nowhere to go. I know what it's like to sign things you shouldn't because you're scared and alone. I know what it's like to have people with money and power tell you you're worthless." She looked out at the faces of women who flinched at those words because they'd heard them too. "They were wrong about you," she said simply. "And this place exists to prove it." The crowd applauded. Some cried. Some crossed their arms, skeptical. But they stayed. Proving her right would take time, not speeches. Within a year, there were 3 Lionel Miles centers, then 5, then 10. Each one tailored to its city, each one staffed by people who lived the kind of stories they were trying to interrupt. Aurora didn't put her name on them, only her father's. "This isn't about me becoming a brand," she told Patricia when a magazine asked for a cover shoot. "It's about building something that won't collapse when people forget my face." Years passed. Nia grew from a baby who clung to Aurora's shirt to a girl who painted messy family portraits with 3 figures: Mom, Nia, and a man standing a little apart, still awkward, but present. "Is that your dad?" Aurora asked once, pointing at the stick figure in a flannel shirt. "Yeah," Nia said matter-of-factly. "He makes terrible pancakes, but he tries really hard." Trying, Aurora had learned, mattered. Trying didn't erase what Damien had done. It didn't rewind the blizzard or the delivery room. But it meant Nia had something Aurora never did: a father who showed up, even if he'd arrived at the job badly late. When Nia was 9, she stood in the front row at the opening of the 30th Lionel Miles Center, swinging her legs while Aurora spoke to a room full of women who looked like her past. "I am not your savior," Aurora told them. "I am proof." She saw heads tilt. "Proof that you can be thrown away and still build something," she continued. "Proof that what they did to you doesn't get to be the final chapter. You may not have a hidden inheritance. You may not have a lawyer walking into a shelter with a briefcase, but you have something else." She smiled. "You have each other. You have a building built for you, not just around you. And you have the right to decide that this moment, standing in this room, is not your ending. It's your turning point." Later that night, after the speeches and the handshakes and the quiet conversations in corners with women who whispered, "Me too," Aurora flew back to Charleston. Home wasn't marble anymore. It was a simple house near the water, wind chimes on the porch, weeds in the garden that never quite stayed pulled. On the kitchen table, Nia's homework sprawled next to center reports. "Are you tired?" Nia asked, flopping into a chair. "You always look tired after those trips." "A good tired," Aurora said, dropping a kiss on her daughter's hair. "The kind you get from lifting heavy things that matter." Nia's brow furrowed. "Like when you lifted me?" she asked. "When I was a baby and they tried to take me?" Aurora looked at her, surprised. They'd always spoken honestly, but the question still hit tender places. "Yes," she said, "exactly like that." Nia considered this, then nodded. "Good," she said. "Keep lifting. Other people's moms need it." That night, when the house was quiet and the sea air moved gently through the open window, Aurora sat on the porch with a glass of wine and thought about endings. About the woman she'd been on that labor bed, voice gone, body wrecked, power stolen. About the girl who'd packed her whole life into a backpack while a social worker waited in the doorway. About the version of herself who'd believed Evelyn when she called her broken. They were all still inside her somewhere, but they didn't drive anymore. She pulled a worn envelope from her pocket. Inside was a letter she'd written months earlier and copied for every New Center's library. Dear girl who thinks this is the end, it began. She'd written it to her younger self, to the woman on the cot at the shelter, to anyone who'd ever been told they were lucky just to be allowed in the room. It ended like this. You will be called weak by people whose entire power depends on you believing them. Don't. You will be asked to sign things while you're bleeding. Say no, if you can. And if you couldn't, if you already signed, if you already walked out into the blizzard, hear this clearly. You are not finished. Rock bottom feels like death. It's actually a foundation. Build on it. She'd signed it, not with her name, but with 3 words. From someone who did. In another state, Evelyn Cole died in prison with a nurse holding her hand because no one else came. Aurora arranged a simple burial, not because Evelyn deserved it, but because Aurora refused to let the woman who tried to destroy her write the last chapter of her own character. I'm not doing this for you, she murmured at the graveside. I'm doing it so my daughter never has to wonder if I let anyone die in hatred on purpose. Damien stood a few feet away, hands shoved in his coat pockets, eyes wet. Are you happy? He asked softly after the short, awkward service. After everything, are you actually happy? Aurora thought about it. About Nia's laughter. About the centers humming with life. About quiet mornings where nobody judged how much jam she put on her toast. Yes, she said. I am. He nodded once. Good, he said. They tried to make sure you never got that. They failed, Aurora replied, like they failed at almost everything that mattered. Years from now, when people told the story, they'd focus on the dramatic moments, the labor room divorce, the wedding arrest, the mansion reduced to rubble. But the real victory was smaller, quieter, harder to film. It was in every woman who walked into a Lionel Miles center convinced she was nothing and walked out with a plan, a paycheck, a sense of self. It was in every child who grew up watching a mother refuse to stay broken. It was in a little girl in Charleston who had 2 parents who loved her in very different ways and who would never again question her worth. One night, as the sun set over the water in streaks of gold and pink, Nia curled up beside Aurora on the porch swing. Mom, she asked. Yeah? If someone ever tries to make me feel small, Nia said, eyes serious, what should I do? Aurora smiled, that slow, dangerous smile that had once made a ballroom full of people go silent. First, she said, remember that their opinion doesn't change your size. Then decide whether they're worth your voice. And if they are, stand up, speak clearly, and let them know you're untouchable. Nia grinned. Like you. Like us, Aurora corrected. We don't come from nothing, you and I. We come from fire. Somewhere far from that porch, another woman slept on a shelter cot, thinking her story was over. In the morning, she'd see a flyer for a new center opening downtown. She'd walk through doors funded by a girl who once signed divorce papers on a bloody hospital sheet. She'd sit across from a counselor paid by a woman who had decided that her happiest ending wasn't revenge. It was making sure no one else had to choose between survival and self-respect. And as the narrator of this story, I'll leave you with this. People will tell you that money is power. They're wrong. Power is knowing your worth when someone is doing everything they can to make you forget it. Aurora learned that on the coldest night of her life. And in the end, that lesson, not the $1 billion, not the mansion, not the headlines, is what built her empire.